Sorry about that little
Hello,
technical issue,
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah, so many technicals.
The interwebs are a fickle mistress.
Indeed, they are. Indeed, they are. Cruel.
Cruel, insubordinate, churlish, untimely.
Insubordinate and churlish.
Um,
Done messed up, Aaron.
I'm on double duty today. I've got coffee in one mug and I've got tea in another mug. I'm gonna have to use the restroom in about 40 minutes. This is probably not a good idea.
Have you ever heard of the game I like coffee, but I don't like tea?
I've heard of the rap lyric, I like my sugar with coffee and cream.
Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, full steam, too sweet to be sour, too nice to be mean. On the tough
That's
guy
exactly the one.
style, I'm not too keen. Gonna change the world, I'm a plot and scheme. Yo, Mario C likes to keep it clean. Gonna shine like a sunbeam. Keep unwrapping, because that's my dream.
That is way more of the lyric than I knew.
You had no idea what box you were opening when you said that.
Nope. That's what happens. As Pandora once learned, that's what happens when you open strange boxes.
I'm more of a Spotify guy.
Da-da-da.
The question though, that's for real is, do you know the game I like coffee but I don't like tea?
I don't. Share, if you would.
I like coffee but I don't like tea. The rules are that simple. I like coffee but I don't like tea. And so you basically have to figure out what the theme is. So it would be like, I like ships but I don't like boats. I like candy, but I don't like Skittles. I like friendship, but I don't like community. And you have to figure out like exactly why I like some of these things, but not some of the other things.
Oh, so it's like a detective game?
It's kind of like a detective game.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Maybe we'll play that when we're done here. But yeah, these are weird times. Things are tough in New York. Things are tough in some other cities. But thank God, doing okay. All things considered, it is a very weird a weird Lent. I'm sure it's a weird Lent for everybody. So I don't know. We're just kind of doing our best. We're just doing our best.
We are. We gotta hang in there.
Yes. But there's a lot of good news to report.
There's a lot of good stuff going on.
You know, there's a lot of one of the cool things I think about this difficulty, especially from like a church point of view, a ministry point of view, is a lot of people are really coming together and we're working together to just like help people and minister to people and serve to people. You know, one of the reasons that we're doing this, OCF is doing great things. Yes is doing great things. I mean, it's really this wonderful pan-Orthodox effort that's out there, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a really, really beautiful thing. You know, it's you know, we can see this as an opportunity to receive this as kind of like a downtime, a curse. We can see this as an opportunity to love each other and to step up to each other and to care for each other and to bring each other to the Lord. And there's something really wonderful about people actually like coming together. So it's beautiful. And just thank God for the people of goodwill who are stepping up to serve and to preach and to teach and to connect. And thank you guys for coming to join us and just sort of spend a little bit of time together, telling silly jokes sometimes and just trying to find God at work in the midst of some of this craziness and franticness. And when we get to the subject of today's episode, we will definitely get to craziness and franticness.
We certainly will, because that is the whole premise of that entire show.
Yeah.
Good grief. But yeah, we're still kind of doing business as usual. Still more podcasts always. Wandering the Desert still going. We Are Orthodoxy still going. You're filming Be the Bee. Like, we're just kind of trying to keep full steam ahead, I think, with all of the things that we can do here. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm wearing a collared shirt, because I just finished filming Be the Bee like literally 10 minutes before we started this. So that'll come out on Monday, and hopefully that episode, Christian and I drafted it earlier this week. Hopefully that'll deal with some of the frustrations and you know, it's a hard time. It's a Lenty Lent, as many people have observed, and hopefully the episode helps a little bit.
The lentiest Lent that we've ever lented is in fact what I've seen in some places. It's like kind of like of all the Charlie Browns, you're the Charlie Browniest. Kind of like one of those situations.
Yeah, the yellowest shirt with the most sort of like chevron pattern. Is it a chevron pattern on Charlie Brown's shirt? That kind of zigzaggy thing.
I think that is exactly what that is. It definitely is chevron.
Hooray! Not to be confused with the gas station, the geometrical shape. We have a lot of parishes who are sort of doing effective Christian ministry together. And I feel like at this time of creativity, at this time of rolling with the punches and figuring out how we're going to care for each other and serve each other, it is really good stuff, really good times. And parishes are doing effective Christian ministry together and are coming together for some of these opportunities. So thank God, it's really good stuff. What else is new? What else do we have to report?
I think we've got the small group materials coming out. Pretty cool thing that we're doing there, I think, or that we're trying to encourage people to do for themselves, is really just to find more opportunities to be together and to, encourage each other. Because I feel like we can only produce so many things before it starts feeling like, oh, here's another this thing and here's another that thing. Really, at the end of the day, I think that what we're all kind of feeling the sting of by now is just like the isolation and kind of being cut off from, one another. And I know that's for sure. Like what I'm beginning to feel is like, I miss going and like being at church with people and having like our friends over for barbecues, like on Sunday afternoons and things like that. So, I think just finding the opportunities to, to like get out there and do stuff is really good.
Totally. Yeah, and thank you, Stefan, by the way, in the chat, who taught me how to make sure that, that we stop screen sharing. That's good. So what else is going on? We have some small group stuff that we put together, right? That's going to be helpful for people. Bring people together in smaller groups instead of just everybody getting together in big Zooms. Hopefully that's going to be helpful for people. y2am.org/small groups. Hopefully that's going to be helpful. This is also an opportunity, like we talked about last week, just to kind of like support some local businesses and people that are struggling, right? We talked about Cartel Coffee last week. If you've got a favorite like small business, that maybe this is an opportunity to just go and buy something, right? I bought some coffee from Cartel. I bought some tea from a local place here in Astoria Tea Company. These are tough times, and whatever kind of encouragement we can do to each other, whatever kind of, whatever kind of support we can offer to each other. Let's do it.
Yeah, seriously. Go to cartelcoffeelab.com, collections/coffee, and get some coffee. I just had some of their coffee this morning, and it was very, very enjoyable for me. I was very happy to experience it. But yeah, let's all look for ways to kind of like be aware of the people around us. And I mean, again, I think I might have even said this last time, like of all the things that I expected to live through in my life, pandemic was not one of them. Like Pandemic is a board game that I love and definitely not a way of life that I prefer. So I am, just trying to figure out exactly what comes next. I've been looking for other games too. So if you know any good games that my family and I should play, I've heard that Small World is a really good one. I've never played this one, but I've been hearing a lot about that lately. So please, if you know of any good games for my family and me, email us or write it in the chat right now, because we like games.
Is it a small world after all? Is that what you're suggesting?
Oh man, you just could not pass up the opportunity for that, could you?
Can I add to our collective misery by getting that earworm like stuck in your brain right now?
Please don't do that. Please just don't. Can I mute you?
No, I am the host.
No. That means a different thing in the age of pandemic, by the way. In an age of pandemic.
One man is the host. But why don't we, before we get into the main subject of this, and you kind of alluded to it already, like just things we're grateful for before we get into the main bulk of the episode. And you mentioned bikes, getting bikes. That is something that you're very grateful for. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more about that? Why you're grateful?
Well, I think, like I said, just being stuck inside has been, kind of starting to take a mental toll on me, I think, and kind of feeling like I'm waking up in the same day, looking at the same wall, I mean, it really does feel like Groundhog Day in a lot of ways. So I think that I'm feeling glad to have some sort of like something to do, like whether it's just hop on a bike and just kind of go get some moments to myself, which has been really nice, because when you're quarantined with 3 small children, there's not a lot of opportunity to feel like you have any kind of space to think. So I'm grateful for at least a little, like I rode my bike to the grocery store yesterday. That was like one of the best things I've ever done. So that was nice. And I kept my social distance from all the people. Trader Joe's is now making you stand 6 feet apart before you walk in. There's like a line.
They're enforcing social distancing in the line.
They're enforcing social distancing. They're being very nice to us.
Good.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. Not everybody's doing that in line.
Yeah. What are you grateful for, Steve?
So, at the top, we were talking about just like everybody coming together to help. And I'm very grateful for, this isn't a time for jurisdictions. It's not a time for dioceses. I feel like it's a time for church. And it's really like people in the church coming together to help each other, to take care of each other, to support each other. And that's always been like a frustrating thing about working in the church. Like there's always that pressure, like this diocese and that diocese or whatever. But like, this is kind of us as Orthodox Christians coming together and trying to heal and support and grow and push. And so I'm grateful again for that it's a reminder that we are one body in the Lord, that we're here in this together. The Lord is our head. So I kind of take a lot of comfort from that. And that is really through the people, like friends and teammates and coworkers who are just being wonderful. So that's what I'm grateful for. A reminder that the church is sort of bigger than we sometimes default to.
Yes. Thank God, because otherwise we'd be lost.
Yes.
So shall we get to it?
Let's get into it. What are we doing this week? We're going back-to-back weeks. We're not going every 2 weeks. We're going every week.
I know. We're doubling down on the old PCCH double down.
Yeah.
Which is different than the KFC double down. And then probably the least Lenten dish that you could ever. Can you call that a dish? It's more like a heart attack. I don't know what you could call that, but. Yeah.
Insofar as there's no bread, there's also no dish. It's just kind of like slabs of meat.
No, there's plenty of bread. It's just that the bread exists on the outside of the chicken. It's a breaded chicken. I mean, like, who gave the green light on that?
An American hero. That's who.
And why did they let me buy one when I went and bought one? They should have stopped me.
Because they know what's good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess.
But what are we doing this week?
We are doing a little show called Billy on the Street. He's making dreams come true.
Yes, Billy on the Street. So a sort of caveat about Billy on the Street. Billy on the Street is it's a zany show. It is nutty. Like the content can be sort of like crass at times. The reason that we're doing Billy on the Street is because the premise of the show is this guy, Billy Eichner, who you may remember from Parks and Rec. He plays Craig in seasons, 5, 6, and 7, I think, right?
She drove me here.
Yes. That character, right? This super intense, like shouting at each other and just kind of, that is who Billy Eichner plays in this show. And he runs around
all
with
the time.
Microphone and a camera, and he just shoves the microphone in people's faces, and he respects no boundaries and no social distancing, and he is just like in people's faces, and it's frantic and it's hilarious, and it's not particularly like wholesome or enlightening or anything like that, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine.
For sure not.
It's a guilty pleasure of mine, and I think it's kind of a fun sort of nostalgia for, remember Outside, when people could like get up in people's faces and that was a thing? Mm-hmm. And also just kind of a different twist on looking at something, because it's kind of a different kind of show than we've ever looked at before, and the conversation I think is going to go in different directions.
Yes.
So I think it'll be fun. It might not be everybody's cup of tea, but so again, like, buyer beware. It is a very guilty pleasure of mine. I confess that. But Father Andrew says, I remember Outside.
Do you also remember Places? Anybody remember Places? I remember Places.
When we can go to them?
Mm-hmm.
Remember Going? Going was a fun thing.
I remember Going. Those were the days when we could go.
Yeah. So what do you think about Billy on the Street? What's your take on this guilty pleasure of mine?
So I definitely thought that it was funny, but I also think it's a lot. I would definitely say this is a thing that the kids would call extra. I watched like 3 episodes in a row, and that was seriously all that I could handle. Like I couldn't keep going because I was just like, I'm done. And even by the 3rd episode, I definitely felt like, okay, I get it. Like I get the shtick, I get the whatever, and it's just kind of like the same thing, rinse, lather, repeat, whatever it is, lather, rinse, repeat, whatever the whole process is. He gets on, he's frantic. There's another moment, he's frantic again. He's frantic within those moments. And I was just like, okay, I can't anymore. This is good. But I definitely still thought that whatever that kind of, formula was or recipe to the whole show, like it's definitely a funny recipe. But after 3 episodes, I was over it.
That's fair. It is extra, as you said.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I am far more receptive to that show. That is a guilty pleasure. I have watched through the entire series, I think twice. It's an Emmy nominated show, possibly even Emmy winning show. I think it's silly. I think it's absurd. I think it's a really funny, just sort of like tongue in cheek look at pop culture and pop culture tropes and sort of like the game show and the man on the street kind of thing. And just the way he makes fun of celebrities and the way he makes fun, like it's very kind of deconstructive sort of humor. And it is like frantic and super emotionally invested in stuff that absolutely matters not at all, which is where some of the humor comes through. So I like it, and I'm super into it. I could watch those just back to back to back, and I have, and I probably will again at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could see myself like enjoying one every now and then, or like one at a time. But I think the binging character of it started causing me some great anxiety,
Yes.
To that end, I think like one of the things that I would probably say that even just watching it, like I sort of felt like, okay, so our whole thing is to kind of go in and believe, right? Everywhere present, filling all things. Like that's why we kind of started this whole project, to like have the eyes of a bee and try to find God in all things. And I got to be honest with this one, it was a little bit more difficult. It was a little more difficult for me, probably one of the more difficult ones ever, even in some of the ones with like really dark stuff, or whatever, like I still somehow feel like I can find God in that stuff, because I can feel like it's a little bit easier to look. But with something almost just is like meaningless and kind of I don't know, just like silly, like this was a lot harder for me, I think, to at least in the initial viewing. So I think maybe one of the things that I kind of want to talk about right out of the gate here, is just this idea of like the via negativa, right? Like almost trying to find God by where you struggle to see him, right? Like going the opposite way. Well, like, watching this show is anxious, and I don't think that that's God, right? Like, I don't think that the anxiety is God. But to kind of wonder and long for the opposite of that thing, maybe that's more God, right? Like this watching this caused me so much stress that I almost started thinking like, oh, I want peace, right? Like I want to feel peaceful now. And almost that kind of being the path in some of the stuff with me, for how I felt like I was becoming more aware of God's presence when I didn't clearly see him. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like a foil. You're better sort of appreciative of the presence of grace by kind of these presence of like these disturbances, right? And I honestly, I think that's part of the fun of the show, because it is kind of like this deconstructive thing about pop culture. And I think that's kind of the right way to approach this, in terms of just kind of like viewing this as Christians who are sort of just longing for him and trying to find him at work. Like, yeah, there are moments of this anxiety, and there are moments of this franticness, and there are moments of just sort of investment in things that are meaningless and silly, which can be kind of a negative sort of experience. It's like being the bee is sort of like looking into the flower and sort of finding what is good. This is kind of like part of that discernment, right? This is the stuff that gets sort of like sifted away to hopefully give us like a deeper appreciation of like the opposite, the calm and the peace and the sort of investment in meaningful things, which I kind of think, right? I think it's also sort of appropriate that we're doing this episode One, because of just the surface level sort of nostalgia. And two, I think this is like a particular time when it's easy to get emotionally invested in the wrong stuff. And when it's easy to sort of get worked up about the wrong stuff. Kind of what we're getting into in like Monday's Be the Bee episode as well. So maybe like it's just kind of providential and wise that we're sort of taking this via negativa that you said at this particular time, because I don't know, like Lord knows myself, like I can find myself wrapped up and sort of overly sort of paying attention to negative things. And this is a way to like leverage that into something positive rather than just kind of spiral in some of those negative things and want them for their own sake.
Right. Right. But I will say, kind of with that being kind of like the caveat to how I started thinking through this, like that's kind of where I had to start. I did find that there was something that was really fascinating to me. And that in particular was Billy's use of names, like the way that he just continually over and over and over again just calls people by the name. Right. He's like, oh, come with me, Greg. Oh, Greg. Oh, no, Greg. What are we going to do, Greg? Come on, Greg. Like he's always saying people's names. And even in the middle of freaking out, right, he's just always calling people by the name. And there was something that was just like, even though it was like, you know, he was clearly just going crazy and like a ball of anxiety, that there was something that was really beautiful about that to me. Is that the right word? I don't know, like just like the name that kind of came with it. Everything he said. Like, and where are you from, Helena? Okay, and come on, Elena, tell me the answer to this question, Elena. Like there was something that like you never felt like you were missing the person. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, totally. I think like the name I think is has very sort of like rich scriptural sort of symbolic resonance, right? I mean, like this is something that we see in scripture so often. Like you pointed this out when we were, you know, preparing for this earlier, right? Like God's the prerogative that he gives Adam to sort of like name the animals, right? There's something sort of there's a knowledge there. There's sort of a kinship there. There's something that happens when Adam has this ability. The fact that like the people in the Old Testament like know the name of the Lord, right? They can call him Yahweh. The fact that like Jesus, right, in the New Testament, like he kind of renames God in a sense and tells us to call him Father. Like there is something intimate and something familiar by the fact that we can call each other, not kind of abstract in a third person or second person, but there's this very first person sort of thing. And I think there was a lot of like connection, which is sort of interesting. Because there's two things that resonated for me as a New Yorker, right? Because Billy is on the streets of New York running around. Like one, he is, well, three things maybe. One, he's calling people by their name. He's getting their name and connecting with them on that level. Two, he's looking them in the eye, and there's this real sort of like attention that is being given to the person, which in the mess that any sort of big city is, you know, New York is not unique in that sort of way. You tend to avoid eye contact. You tend to sort of brush by people and not really engage with them in a meaningful personal sort of way. And three, that he would, anytime he ran around being silly, like ask a stranger for help with the quizzes, he would grab them by the hand. And there was even this like this very kind of intimate physical contact. Like you don't touch strangers. Well, you sure as heck do not grab them by the hand and sort of like sprint down 6th Avenue with them or whatever it is, right? But there were all these markers of like in the midst of this anonymity in this big city where, you know, if you think about it, right? Like you've obviously come here for beach treats and to come for work, like going from my place onto the subway, going into the office, like how many hundreds of people on a particular commute, like you were literally within arm's reach of, that are just kind of faceless, nameless masses in a crowd, right? This is like, I see you, I hear you, I want your name, and I will actually kind of reach out to you and do this kind of silly thing with you. Like there's something personal and yeah, I don't know if beautiful is the right word, but kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's that touch of the personal, right? That's so meaningful to us. Like there isn't a. It kind of makes me again realize, right, that like the importance of the fact that our understanding of God is as who, not as what, right? Like our God is who, and even like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, kind of in the way that he talks about like the move of faith, that for him, he says that the question of how is inherently a question of disbelief, right? Like, how did Jesus turn water into wine? How did he walk on water? How did he do this? How did what, like any of that? There's inherently kind of like a lack of faith that goes along with that question, the question of how. Whereas if the question is who, like, who is this man who walks on water? Who is this man who changes water into wine? Then we're already moving into faith. We're moving into someone that we can believe in, rather than kind of questioning the process by which he did this. And if we understand that he is the God man, then we have no need to ask the question of how, because of who he is. Like, who the person is the answer to the question of how, because the question of how fades away, right? Like,
because of course he can.
Right. It's the end of till we have faces, when Arul stands before the gods, right? I see, O Lord, but before your face all questions fade away. And the same with Job, when he stands before God. Like, he's just like, okay, I'm good. Like, I get it. You're God, right? And that kind of becomes like the ultimate like silencing factor, is that encounter with the personal, as opposed to this kind of like shticky, I don't know, like magic god, who does magical things or whatever. I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining the counterpoint of the personal, but like,
totally.
There's something to touch. There's someone to touch, someone to see. And I think that is why that does feel really valuable. And kind of even what we talked about last week too, right? Like, this idea of whatever like the transcendent or divine kind of factor is at play in Groundhog Day, whatever it is, who knows? But there is something that's clearly happening where Phil is seen like as the individual that matters, right? As the person that matters. And there's something not to be lost in that.
Yeah, it's like it's this interesting way that the transcendent is known in this personal way, right? Like the transcendent God, who is bigger than all of creation and wider than the heavens and everything, right, is at once at the same time like personal and known in his son, known in this like incarnate, embodied sort of way. And we talked about that last week in terms of this attention, right? That if there is some sort of divine figure in the background of Groundhog Day, like somebody is literally pressing reset on the world, on the entire cosmos, each and every day for the sake of Phil in particular, right? Like the infinite is kind of focusing all of its loving attention on Phil. And there's so many ways in scripture too that like Christ, when he reaches out, right? When Christ, who is the perfect icon of his father, his unknowable father, right? He reaches out to people in this personal sort of way. Like when the daughter of Jairus is dead, he reaches out this hand and sort of lifts her from her grave, right? Her bed of death. Even last Sunday, we had the story of the son of the man who was paralyzed, and sort of he fell as if dead when the demons left him. And again, Jesus puts out his hand and lifts him up. You think of Peter reaching out, right? When he's floundering in the waters, again, Jesus grabs him by the hand. The icons that we have of the resurrection, like Jesus grabbing Adam and Eve by the hand and sort of pulling them up. There's something really like embodied, right? It's not just sort of like disembodied personhood. There's something very real and tangible in connection. And it's like somehow the God who made all hands and the God who does not need hands to create has a hand and grabs us by the hand. This crazy tension between these things that seem opposed on some level, like the immanent and the transcendent, the completely beyond and the completely sort of personal. And it's sort of like that he knows us by name and that he takes us by the hand gently, and sort of leads us out of death and leads us out of sin and leads us out of just sort of the difficulties of our lives, because he's got us and he cares enough to grab each of us by the hand, sort of individually, personally, and pull us out. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Which is kind of wild, right? Because like, while the focus, and this is something that I started actually getting really interested in kind of, as I watched this, like obviously Billy's having these encounters with the people that are at the forefront of the camera, right? He's talking to like 3 people or 2 people or 1 person, whatever. But then usually what's going on is because he's creating such a scene, people in the background are like walking by and just kind of like watching and seeing what's going on and trying to understand. Like there's this one where he has these three young girls and Will Ferrell scream for Who Wants an American Girl doll. And like everyone who walks by in the background is just like, what is this man doing to terrorize these poor children that are just screaming in the middle of New York City? And
this middle-aged man.
And this middle-aged man who's screaming at another girl. Like, it's just very bizarre. But while Billy only knew the names of like one or a few of the people, I had this moment where I thought like, oh, God knows all those background people as well. Like they are held in this as well. It's not just like Billy on the street. It's like God on the street, right? Like with all the people, knowing all of them, knowing them by name. And there's this really like, you know, moving little passage in Revelation 2 where God gives like, he says that he gives like a white stone to each person, and written on the stone is a name that only the person receiving the stone understands. And there's this like, it's just this really beautiful image of like this kind of, you know, uniqueness that we don't lose our uniqueness in this relationship with God. It's not a thing of fusion. It's not a thing of being like absorbed somehow, but rather like God as a person condescends to relate to us as person as well. Like he wants to be in this person to person, you and me kind of relationship, the I thou, right, that Martin Buber talks about. Like this idea of like, you are you and I am I, and let's have a relationship somewhere in between those two spaces, which is like really cool.
Because when that actually happens, none of us are just in the background. Right. All of us have this sort of I thou relationship with the Lord. All of us have this kind of like face to face. We shall know him as we is, and we shall see him as he sees us kind of thing. Right. None of us are just ancillary background characters that are faceless or nameless or just sort of pop into frame for a second. All of us have this God who sort of like intensely looks us in the face, which is going to be a lot when it happens, right? To sort of rise again and stand before the Lord, like that's intense. And that's also amazing, right? Like all of the attention of across time and space, right, is sort of uniquely upon you in this kind of awe-inspiring and sort of fearful way on the one hand, but also like how amazing is that, right? That like everything just kind of collapses upon you, and like you are loved uniquely and you are loved intently. Right?
Yeah.
With no dilution, not just a face in the crowd, but it's like, wow.
I think that like, you know, one of the other things too, kind of to this particular show, I mean, really the whole point of the show is to make you laugh. Like that's it. Humor, right? Like he's not, I don't think he's trying to do anything deeply profound.
There's no moral of the story.
There's no more. Yeah, exactly. It really is just like, here's some random questions about obscure pop culture facts that you may or may not know, and some hilarious jokes that are in there. Like, I love when he goes, which of these, you know, three normal seeming blonde women was born in Africa? Charlize Theron, Pamela Anderson, Dana Carvey, or apartheid Barbie? Like, and like, I mean, like, if you pay any attention or know half of like anything about anything, you know, like two of the answers are obviously out, right?
Yeah.
But they're very hilarious options for something. And you're always shocked, like when people don't get it, or like when he just walks up to someone and goes like, name three white people, and you're like,
and they can't,
yeah. And you're like, what? Oh, well, I guess that's that level of franticness. But I mean, we've talked about like humor and laughing and other places, you know, especially like when we've done like comedy specials and stuff. But I think this one, you know, the role of humor now, I think has been really helpful for me, right? Because I think like with all this stuff of, you know, COVID, and also just like with Lent, like yesterday in particular, like the world just felt like a very great burden to me. Everything just felt very, 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 very heavy. Like, you know, I felt like there was just no place to just kind of like turn off. You know, it's like you go to the store and it's like you can't, you know, make eye contact with anybody because that's how you get COVID. You come home and you have to like take a shower after you get home from the store in case you have, COVID in your hair. You then go to prepare your meal and it's like, oh great, vegetables again. And like everything is just taking like so much intentionality all around. And the same is true, like, because I also am a therapist. And so I've moved right now to like doing video sessions, which is so difficult. Like there's something to it that's so difficult. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but you have to be clear that you're paying so much more attention because like, it's so easy, right? When you're on a computer to like think that maybe the person you're talking to is like looking at their Facebook or like doing whatever. And you have to be very clear, like, okay. And so everything just demands this utter engagement all the time, everywhere. And, I think I've realized like how much I just am used to kind of like, I don't know, disconnecting or tuning out or whatever it may be. But having the opportunity, I think, just to kind of laugh a little bit, it definitely, I think, brought a little bit more of an experience of joy and kind of lifted a little bit more of the burden, because everything just feels so intense right now, everywhere you go,
Yeah. And that's a hard thing to balance, right? Because I think there's kind of two things that are at play at the same time. Like, we were joking before about this is the lentiest sort of Lent, right? I mean, on some level, like this is maybe for a lot of us kind of the most, maybe the first time we're really sort of getting towards the core of like what Lent is. Because, we touched on this a little bit, like in the past, like Father Alexander Schmemann, like his book on Great Lent, right? Like a lot of this is sort of bringing our own failures to the surface and sort of manifesting like how hard it is and how you can't do this alone. And when it becomes like not simply about the sort of the normal kind of expected religious observances, right? But when there's like an intentionality when you're going to the market, right? When there's an intentionality when you're walking through your door, when there's like constant effort and intentionality, it like that's fasting on some level, right? That is this thing that is like grinding you down and realizing like, I am hungry for you, O Lord. I do not have the strength. I do not have the endurance. Like I can't do this by myself. And so on the one hand, there's
Did I get
and there's the other thing that, right?
I think I don't know if I got disconnected or if you kind of stalled out for a little bit. I think you stalled out.
Okay. I apologize. It could be the, I got a little sign that says my internet connection is unstable. But it's like
my emotional life.
Says the therapist.
Get me out of this house.
The call is coming from inside the house. The virus is coming from inside the house. It's like it has, all this is going to bring us to our knees, right? In the sense of like, I can't do this by myself. But there's also the tension of like, Christians are called to be people of joy. And so like Schmemann talks about that, right? In his book on Great Lent, but he'll also say that, the worst thing that people can say about us as Christians is that we're people with joy. And this kind of like this living between these things that seem very opposed, between on the one hand, this level of, Lord, I can't do it. And Lord, I trust and I hope in your cross and your resurrection. And like, ultimately, like there is still hope and there is still beauty and there is still joy. Maybe like, a simple little smile is one of the ways that we can sort of navigate through this, right? To just laugh, I mean, like if we are people who are joyless, if we are people who are just kind of being not humbled by this, right? In this constructive sort of sense, but ground down into this. And I think we can all sort of see moments of our own psyche, right, over the course of the last couple of weeks, that it's been hard. It's just, and there's no answer, because it's kind of this tension between things that seem opposed on their surface. But it's like, how can we both sort of realize like, okay, maybe we're reaching the limit of our endurance, right? We're reaching that kind of realization that I can't do this without the Lord. And he's still in control, and there is still beauty and joy and hope and silliness even, right? Just something to cut the tension.
Well, and I think that's been the question, like, that I've been asking myself right now is like, where is my joy located? Like what, where is it? Where does it reside? Because if it resides like in kind of like these weird circumstantial things, like even in going to church, then like my joy is not in the Lord and in his resurrection. Like that joy that, you know, that springs forth from the tomb of Christ is something that should never, ever be able to be taken away.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we should never, ever lose that joy. I think we go to church and receive the sacraments to participate in that joy more fully. Right? But the fact that we don't go or can't go or whatever, it's not like, you know, the resurrection's been canceled, right? Like it's just that like some services have been canceled and this isn't forever. And it's for now, like it's going to be okay. But I think that there is this sense where I'm having to confront in myself, like this question of like, where does my joy reside? What is the actual source of my joy? Is it in getting out of the house, or is it in Christ getting out of the tomb? Like, where do I find the actual kind of thing that sustains me? Because otherwise, you know, I think there is that sense where it does begin to feel like almost like the limits of my endurance are getting tested so much. Like I start thinking about that story of St. Anthony, when the hunter comes to visit him and he sees like all the monks kind of out partying in the desert. And by, you know, you can imagine what a monastic party looks like. It's probably keg stands, obviously.
Rager.
A total rager. So much raging. That good old monastic raging. I mean, they were probably like skipping stones. And like that was probably the extent of it. And he was like, what are they doing? They're so frivolous. But like the hunter comes and he's scandalized by this. And he is just like, I thought y'all were believers. And you know,
that's how he said it.
It's exactly how he said it. It's you know, Koine Greek. But like you it's NIV. I don't know. Anyway, he asks St. Anthony, you know, like what Kanye Greek, says Father Andrew. Yeah, Kanye Greek. He asks St. Anthony, like, what's going on here? I thought you guys were supposed to be devoted to prayer all the time. And so St. Anthony says, okay, take out an arrow and put it in your bow and shoot it over that mountain. And so the hunter does it. He goes, okay, do it again. The hunter does it. So do it again. The hunter does it. Do it again. It's like, dude, Father Anthony, I can't keep doing this, because if I keep doing that, like it's going to put too much tension on the bow and the bow's going to break. And St. Anthony says, so it is with the brethren. Right. That like we to put too much tension on it, like does lead to, I think, this kind of, you know, overwhelming burden that the broken human spirit can't really bear all the time. And I think, you know, even to kind of think medievally, like this is why the church and kind of like the society built in things like Carnival, right, to kind of be these release valves, or like Mardi Gras kind of as this like release valve. And I'm not suggesting that we all do that, but like the reality is that like this was kind of like the mind of the time, was that like it's a lot to put on a person, you know, to like do these kinds of like rigorous spiritual things. And so like, yeah, maybe there is a little bit of, you know, need to like relax the rules a little bit every now and then, just to kind of like catch your breath and like dive back in. Like the point is not to live in the broken rules, but to just catch your breath. And so there's part of me that's like, maybe I'll, you know, just have a glass of wine on a Wednesday. I don't know. Like maybe that would actually just be like really helpful right now. And I could go back to fasting fully tomorrow, you know? But I think maybe part of like I don't know if I've inherited this, like, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. If I've inherited this kind of like former Protestant guilt that's just like, oh, but I have to like, I can't do anything wrong. And if I break the fast, then I'm a sinner. Whereas it's like, not really. Like it's, it's a glass of wine. Like it's not, you know, like infidelity. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's like, where's the line here? I guess I don't know. I don't know if
Sure.
that makes any sense.
Which I think is one of the reasons why we decided to take pop culture and to make it sort of weekly and live like this, just so, because we're doing something that's interesting, and we're doing something that's thought provoking, and we're doing something that's kind of silly. And in the midst of a tough day or a tough week, like maybe we need that, right? Like So an experience that I had, which is very much in line with the story about the hunter and Father Anthony, right? Saint Anthony. I remember the first time I ever went to Mount Athos, and it was after I took the bar exam. I went with my really good friend. We climbed the mountain. We go to Simonopatra Monastery. That's the first monastery that we visited on the Holy Mountain. Like we go to the, if you've ever been there, like you go to the little jetty and you climb up, and it's exhausting, and you see the monastery before you, and it's like, we're here, we're finally here. We go in, we get met by the guest master, and he gets to know us a little bit. Like I say who I am, like I just finished law school, took the bar exam, I'm going to be a lawyer. And for the next 45 minutes, while we're sitting there drinking a little bit of water and a little bit of raki and a little Turkish delight, he's just ripping on me and telling lawyer jokes. And it was amazing. Like he just like, and again, they weren't mean spirited or anything. He's just kind of telling me like all these like very silly jokes. And he just like wraps his arm around me at one point, and he's like, "I kid because it's fun. I just want to put a smile on your face." And the contrast, right, between that, like sitting in this old stone room, being very close to this, like the church, which is the center of the monastery, and having that, it was a very unexpected sort of experience. And yet the same people, right, who I think were willing to give themselves the grace to tell these jokes. And like, as I would go back to the monasteries, I'd work in the kitchen, and you'd hear them joking in the kitchen. Sometimes there was this profound sort of lightness, which were these moments of tensions. And yet these were the same people, right, who, if it was a 12-hour vigil, like they were there for the 12-hour vigil. And even sometimes I remember being at a 12-hour vigil, like one monk, when he notices that I was kind of like very tired and struggling, comes over and just kind of tells a little joke and kind of gives me a wink and a smile, and, you know, walks back to his standard again. Like, we're human. And I think this maybe becomes one of the, as our religiosity is tested, right? That like, these are things that on the surface level are scandalous, right? To be sitting with these monks who are telling jokes, right? But there's something energizing of the heart, and the heart can be dry, and the heart can be sort of like pushed to its extreme. And sometimes you just need to laugh. It's, you know, another wrinkle on the sort of Saint Sophrony thing. Like you spend your time looking into the abyss, right? Like looking into these deep existential questions, and then you pull back and you have a glass of tea. Like we kind of need those moments of refreshment, maybe now more than ever, just to keep our sanity and realize like what's actually going on. So yeah, it's okay to chuckle every now and again, even if it's kind of like silly. Don't be mean-spirited about it, right? But just kind of like give each other an opportunity to laugh.
Right. Exactly. So I think that one of the things too that like we've talked about a lot is kind of like the idea of persona versus person, right? And since the humor of this kind of stuff is based on this persona that Billy is cultivating, right? I mean, you talked about that a little bit, that whatever his Billy on the street self is, it's a role. It's a role that he's playing. I mean,
it's
maybe
the same
it's
character
like,
as Craig.
Exactly, but all the time.
Yeah.
He's irreverent about all the things, just like so ready to get mad at people. And like, what was hilarious to me is how quickly he went from being interested to being super offended. Like those were the moments that were just like really hilarious to me, when he was just like, yeah, tell me, like, can you help me find it for $1? Do you know whatever? He's like, oh, get out of here! Like there's like how suddenly upset he gets. It's so funny.
There's this great one where he's giving somebody a quiz, and like they're in the second round of the quiz. He's been with her for probably 10 minutes, whatever. And she makes a joke. She sort of refers to who let the dogs out. And he looks at the camera, rolls his eyes, and just walks away. He's like, I can't even. And he just walks away like in the middle of this quiz, and it's beautiful. No explanation.
Like, and it's the way that he just is kind of like strangely mean, but also like still like funny somehow. I don't know how like that happens, because people seem to really enjoy being with him still, even though he's like kind of a jerk.
Oh, totally, right. It's this persona that he plays. It's this character that he plays.
Yes.
And I think like there's an interesting tension, right? Because he's playing this character, but he's also kind of inviting people in some way to be very real. He's sort of like he's catching these people on the midst of their commute to work or whatever it is. I have to make a bus. And like, he's playing this character, but he's actually sort of like asking them what they're into, and he's asking them to share stuff about themselves. And this weird tension, right, between the persona that he is playing and like the actual sort of personhood that we all carry around with us.
Yeah. I mean, even what you were saying, there reminded me of this moment where he walks up to someone and he says, "Who is the worst person?" and like that question, I was just like, that's a horrible question. But the reality is, I think all of us have a person that we think is the worst person, right? Like there's one point where he starts saying things, and it's, oh, sorry, I'm throwing things. It's not funny because, well, I mean, it is funny, but like he walks up to someone and he goes, "Are you aware that Helen Hunt is making somewhat of a comeback?" And she's like, "Oh no, I can't stand her." And he's like, "I know, I hate her." And she's like, "That's a hard word." He goes, "I hate Helen Hunt. I hate her. I hate her so much." And he just keeps like going into, because he's clearly making this woman uncomfortable by saying that he hates her.
Yeah.
But I think that like there was something that was really interesting there, because he also will invite people to say things like, "Which celebrity do you hate?" And there is this kind of like drawing out of the confession of like, we've got these demons kind of lingering in our hearts, but we want to be these really nice people, right? We want to be polite, and we don't want to, well, I don't hate anybody. I just really don't like so-and-so, and I don't judge anybody, but I wouldn't be caught dead doing what they were doing. And so there is this kind of like falseness that we present. Whereas I think that we probably would be a lot better off if we could almost just, and I don't think we should lean into it, but I think if we could admit, yeah, I hate that person. Like I legitimately hate them. And we might actually stand a chance, I think, of like being healed somehow, because then we are able to lift the mask, right? Like even his persona, which is this like intense, angry, whatever that he leans into, invites people to reveal kind of, I think, what you're saying, like that inner personhood, right? The truth of what's going on in their hearts, and to maybe take off their persona of being these really nice, civil people, when in reality, not every part of them is nice and civil, right?
Yeah.
So there is like that really interesting dynamic.
Which is kind of a dynamic that's at play in art, right? Like art on a superficial level is not true, right? It's like stories that are made up and characters that are not real, right? On some level, it's not true, but it's kind of this invitation to more underlying truth. It might not be factually true, but it can be true. And I think there's an interesting thing, because like it is a character, right? I mean, I think there is something well conceived about it, and artistic about it, and intentional about it, because I think even in terms of the moral of the show, like again, I think there's something sort of deconstructive over the stuff that we sometimes get invested in, the pop culture, the reverence that we have for sort of celebrity culture and all that sort of stuff. It kind of knocks it down a peg, and it's kind of like this mask, right? This persona actually somehow, in the same way that art just sort of hits us, right? You read a novel and it's not factually accurate. Like those people never existed. They were never born. Those things never happened, but it's kind of an invitation into truth. And like, sometimes we need that. And like, in the same way that maybe we need a chuckle, it's a reminder that like the falsehood of art actually can be this invitation into truth. And it's something Schmemann talks about, actually, like again, in great length, like that we can, if we're going to be doing a reading, right? If we're going to sort of be exposing ourselves to things during the course of Lent, like it doesn't necessarily only have to be things that are superficially religious. Like it's totally okay to listen to some good music. It's totally okay to like read a book, read some poetry, whatever it is, right? Because there is something about the way that art in the mask that it plays can actually sort of invite us to take off the mask that we sometimes wear. And be honest about what the heck is going on. And it can be sort of this invitation into connection. It can be this invitation into confession. It can be this invitation into self-knowledge, right? As opposed to like the normal the personas that we tend to wear, especially in polite society, but anywhere, right? I mean, like on some level, I feel like I particularly like struggle with this as a 3, to sort of, bring kind of our Enneagram stuff into this every now and again. Like there's a mask that I wear of my own sort of success that I try to project, right? There's a persona that I try to I kind of habitually just sort of fall into on a daily basis as a human, like even when the camera is off. But sometimes those personas need to kind of come off. We need to shed them so that we can be known and be vulnerable.
You know, like there's a couple of things there, I think, that you're saying that are really interesting, right? Like the power. First, I love what you said. Like, it doesn't have to be this kind of like, we're diving into all the like the religious things and only reading religious books and only listening to chant music and only da 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 da. It could just be like, no, we're going to actually dive into some things that are just actually good. C.S. Lewis wrote an essay called "Sometimes Fairy Stories May Say Best What's to Be Said." It's so Lewisy.
That is a heck of a title.
So, yeah, he says, supposing that by casting all these things into an imaginary world, i.e. talking about like the story of the Christian faith and the passion of Jesus, supposing that by casting all of these things into an imaginary world, stripping them of their stained glass and Sunday school associations, that one could make them for the first time appear in their real potency. Could one not thus steal past those watchful dragons of the heart? Like I love that idea, because like there's this, you know, this sense of, first of all, that our hearts are kind of guarded by stuff, right? Like we are resistant to like seeing ourselves as bad people, or to seeing maybe even the things in us that are bad. But then like the stories maybe that we begin to read, we begin to see some parts of ourselves emerging, right? Like when you read The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, right? Like I can't read through that book, particularly the chapter where Eustace turns into a dragon and then is undragoned. I can't read through that without just like sobbing, because I begin to realize like, oh crap, like I'm a dragon in my soul. Like my soul is dragony, falling asleep with dragony thoughts. Like it's really quite a miracle that I myself have not been yet changed into a dragon. And it, you know, without that story, like I wouldn't begin to see that like there's parts of me that need to be, you know, healed. And what I love about that too, right? Even when Eustace tries to like scratch off his scales, he can't do it.
He can't do it alone. Yeah.
He can't do it. Aslan has to like dig his claws in, and it hurts. And I think that like so much of what you're talking about now is that even the situation that we're in now, I feel like is in some ways the claws of Aslan like ripping into us and tearing away everything that we idolize, everything that we, you know, have kind of put into these categories of the things that we think, again, where we believe the source of our joy is the source of our joy at Trader Joe's, is the source of our joy in going to concerts, is the source of our joy even in attending services. And like, if that's the case, then I think we're still falling short. Right. And I think that, you know, to speak more to Schmemann, and Schmemann, one of my favorite things that Schmemann talked about in his journals is he says, like, perhaps maybe one of the greatest things that could happen for Christianity would be for orthodoxy to disappear. Because if orthodoxy disappeared, then maybe finally Christ could reappear in all of his glory. And like, I sort of feel like that is what we're being invited into. He's like, the Lord is saying, can you look past kind of these outer adornments and these outer vestments and these outer, not that they're bad and not that they're totally unnecessary, but can you remember your first love? Can you put your heart where it belongs rather than in all of these kinds of things that can just be taken away? Because they can be taken away, and they have been taken away. And yet Christ will still be risen in 2 weeks. Like there's no way around that. You know, Pascha is still coming, and it's still going to be Pascha, and I'm still going to smoke a good brisket, and it's still going to be amazing because it's still the joy of the resurrection, whether or not I get to go, you know, sing the songs that I like. Because really, when it comes down to it, I think part of the reason that like I get so upset, which is different than being grieved, right? I get upset that I'm not there is because I'm attached to these things. And it's possible, I think, even to be attached to church, right? In this kind of sense of my own religiosity or my own kind of like external observance, right?
Totally.
It's the Good Samaritan.
Yeah. Yes. Which, spoiler alert, we'll get into that on Monday's episode of Be the Bee. And yeah, I'm honestly like even this conversation, because, you know, I was sort of reminiscing about trips to Mount Athos. Like those are conversations that I had with monks when I was there. Like I remember the first or second time that I was there talking about, you know, like putting it on a sort of a pedestal, being like, you know, what am I going to do when I go back home? I'm going to miss this place. I'm going to miss the opportunity for the services every day. Like my spiritual life is not the same at home. Like I just can't, this is unique. I can't do this at home in the same sort of way. and again, very gently, right? But the monk that I was talking to sort of raises his eyebrow, and he's like, the life in Christ is not something that you have to get on a plane to fly to find and participate in. There's nothing preventing your house from being just as much of a sanctified place as this is, because it's not the place. It's just sort of, it's the ongoing struggle and the relationship with the Lord. And you look around at these people, like, again, this is the monks sort of saying this to me, like, none of us are saints. We're people like you who just kind of work the fields, and we go to church, and we try to just sort of be faithful in our own particular way, and we mess up and we confess constantly, which is exactly what you're doing back home. Like, there is no difference between Mount Athos and your particular home and your particular parish. And
I think I remember reading, like, even St. John Chrysostom talking about the importance of Christ being crucified outside of Jerusalem, that like because he wasn't crucified inside the holy city, it was to show like that we should not be confused that Jerusalem itself is like the holy place of God, but rather by being crucified kind of outside of it, being crucified in the world, it actually transforms the entire world into a temple fit for prayer. And like, that is such a powerful idea, right? That like everything, that he wasn't crucified in a church, he wasn't crucified even in Jerusalem, but he was crucified out in the world anonymously and nakedly, like that everything becomes sanctified for prayer, kind of like what you were saying there.
Yeah.
I love that.
And that's on me at that point, right? Because like, if I'm like, I'll be honest, right? Today, this morning, because I felt this sort of work pressure, I had to finalize the script, I had to film, I had to make sure that we got on here. I didn't say my morning prayers this morning. That's on me. Like, that is not because of coronavirus, and that is not like my own sort of not giving time to the Lord, right? Even though I'm saving 2 hours a day on my commute, right? Like, that's on me. It's not because of, I can choose to point my finger at, I can't celebrate the joy of the resurrection in the same sort of way, or I can't this because of outside circumstances, because of whatever. But it's like, when I turn on the live stream on a Sunday and I'm checking my email while the gospel is being read, like, that's on me. That's not the fault of the live stream or the coronavirus. When I have 2 extra hours a day that I am not spending commuting, and I still can't get my lazy rear end out of bed to say my prayers in the morning, like, that's on me. If my home is not an actual like church at home and does not have the grace of a Mount Athos, like, that's on me. It's not because I have the wrong passport or because my elevation is wrong and this is not a hill or a mountain or whatever it is. And that's hard. And that's hard to sort of like take the finger and stop pointing it outward and to point it inward and be like, if this Lent is Lenty in the bad sort of way or difficult, and like, I'm not making the most of this opportunity.
Right. It's the whole Saint Isaac of Syria, right? Like, saying, don't waste your life in vain pursuits. And now we've been given nothing but ample time to not do that. And yet we still find ways to continue to pursue vain things, right? Whether it's just making sure that all that work is done, or because at the end of the day, I think like we do need to wonder, like, what's the point? Again, like, what's the source of our joy? So like, we get all this work done, we make all of these resources, we and then what? Like, if it doesn't actually, right? Like, if it doesn't actually attach to Christ, then attach us or anyone else for that matter, like, we're going to, first of all, be accountable for that, which is like intense. And like, why bother doing it? Like, if it's not really actually leading, us to Christ, like, what's the point? Right. Then it's this religious persona or this church leader persona or this kind of whatever, like, look at me doing like the church thing and like writing these bloggity blogs and doing my bloggity blogs and doing all these poddity pods. And like, it just is what it is. Right. But I think there is like this call here of like, can all of the stuff be stripped away? Can all of the stuff be torn away so that the actual heart can be revealed? So that we feel less, frantic ourselves, to kind of pull it back into Billy on the street, about unimportant things, because like, he is so frantic about stuff that legitimately does not matter. And you feel the franticness of it. You're like, oh goodness, how are they going to be able to know the answers to that? Like, by the way, one of my favorite moments is when he just jumps up to people and just says things like Paul Rudd, and like runs away, and
Oh
but
boy.
anyway, yeah. Oh no. Everything's so intense for him. But I wish that there was a little bit more of a fire in my belly or under my butt or whatever to feel that frantic and concerned about things that actually mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Like to actually kind of like care enough to go to bed on time so that I could wake up on time.
Right. To that frantically like listen when somebody that I love is looking me in the face, perhaps remotely in a situation like this and talking to me. Because I've seen this as well, like even like friend chat, family chats, right? Like I find myself drifting to a text message or whatever it is. Like I'm not frantic about that person that I say that I love. I'm not frantic about the one that I say that I love, because again, I make my excuses and I'm like, yeah, I didn't say my prayers this morning, and I didn't say them last night, and I didn't say them yesterday morning, but I had stuff to do. Because I'm more frantic about the superficial stuff, the stuff that makes me look good, the stuff that brings me joy, which is not true joy, because the job will be gone one day, the podcast will end one day, the whatever will not be here, and I'll be standing like, naked before the Lord with nothing but sort of me and my character, and he'll be like, you old so-and-so.
That sounds like God.
Yeah. Like a grizzled old prospector.
Exactly. Count Sarnet, you old so-and-so.
Ah, peaches.
Ah, peaches.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. It's like, it's hard. It's hard to actually be a Christian, but it's good to pump the brakes every now and again.
Definitely. I think that's what this for sure has been all about. Like, again, just realizing like how different things are now too, right? Even watching this with all the lack of social distancing. It's like there's times when I'm just horrified. When I was horrified watching it, I'm like, no, you can't take that muffin. Don't take that guy's muffin. You don't eat his muffin. Don't stand so close to him. Oh no, don't touch his hand. And I was actually a little like sad that I felt that way, because I was like, oh geez, do I feel like this is the new normal?
Huh.
You know what I mean? Because like there's nothing normal about any of this.
No.
Like people should touch each other. People should be close to each other. Like that's the way it ought to be. I don't know, man. Like, I guess it just made me feel like, okay, what's it going to be like when this is all over? Like, am I going to be so used to like not touching people or like keeping distance from them, or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's hard to know.
Yeah. That's
powerful. I already
right?
felt uncomfortable watching him touch people.
One of the things that I really like about my sort of home parish, such as it is with all the travel, is that they do sort of exchange kind of a greeting of peace, during the course of the liturgy, which not every parish does. And as a hand washer, at first that sort of caught me off guard. And it took me a while to sort of get used to it, but I wonder, right, when that next liturgy is, whenever that might be, May, June, July, August, September. I mean, who the heck knows at this point, right? Who knows? Am I going to be that much more like sheepishly wave from across the pew, right? Like, am I going to grimace when I go up and receive Holy Communion the next time, and be like, right?
I know. And I think that those are real questions that people are going to be having, even in my latest like episode of Wandering the Desert, I kind of talked a little bit about the whole communion thing. Because like what I sort of feel like is happening is just kind of these like two-way monologues that are, like someone's like, you can get sick because reasons. And like, someone's like, well, no, you can't get sick because other reasons. And like, that to me just feels like, I don't know, like really not helpful. I don't know, like, because I guess the reality is like people are still going to be scared, like make all the arguments you want to make about anything. And like, I even came across like someone who said like, if you ever wonder if like you're going to get sick from communion, then you should never take communion ever again because you're not worthy to. And like that to me was like, well, first of all, who's ever worthy? Like, are any of us ever worthy? Like does, believing that I won't get sick from it somehow, that's the thing that makes me unworthy to take communion? Like, how is that the thing? Mm-hmm. Like, I can think of a whole lot of other things that probably make me way more unworthy to take communion. I mean, yeah, like even just right away. But I wonder about that. Like, how are we gonna, I don't know, like be merciful to each other and like care for one another, kind of like when fear has been running the show for, if this goes into like September, or, Despina is saying on the chat that it's gonna, like, you heard that it's going till June. Like, even if it goes till June, that's still like 3 months of doing this. And like, how long does it take to form a habit? Less than 3 months, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like what are our new habitual stances going to be in all of this? And are we gonna like, I don't know, man. There's nothing normal about this, and I don't want it to feel normal.
No. And maybe one of the things that we can do is just sort of have enough grace with each other to allow ourselves to express some of that concern and express some of that fear rather than biting each other's heads off. Like, the fact that we can say that, right? The fact that like you and I are sort of like love each other and are close enough to each other to be able to like talk about this, I think is like part of what it is to be church. And I think there's going to be a lot of, it's like having grace on each other and sort of forgiving each other and having just sort of gentleness with ourselves too. Because I think this is also like what a lot of us could be doing, beating ourselves up about we're not observing Lent properly, beating ourselves up about these sort of like inner doubts, right? But I think, if nothing else, all of these heightened emotions that we're feeling, all of these kind of frustrations and fears and just kind of grief over this normal that shouldn't be normal, right? It's an opportunity for us to be honest with each other. Even if we can't be there in the same room to sort of hold each other's hands or look each other in the eye, we can at least sort of say, yeah, I'm having a hard time with this. And I can see myself potentially having a hard time with it, even when everything is good and fixed, because again, whatever sort of reason, right? And it's not about the sort of dichotomous, this is good or bad, like on a ministry level, on a more fundamental human level, like, why are you feeling scared right now? Thank you for being honest enough to share your fear with me. Let's pray about that fear and let's offer it to God rather than to immediately go to, I'm going to link you 5 articles that prove why you were wrong.
Right. And that'll convince you.
Yes, because it always does.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not scared anymore. I read an article about this thing.
Yes.
On the internet of all places, which is a very reliable, incredible source. I don't know if you've heard, but the internet is very reliable.
I don't know. God help us and God rest us.
Amen.
And just God give us comfort.
Amen.
And God give us a laugh every now and again, because we were talking about sort of, on the one hand, making sure that we don't sort of get into vain stuff, but I don't think that there's necessarily vanity in a laugh and just sort of sharing a chuckle at the same time.
I agree. It's that loosening of the bow.
Yeah.
Well, with a few minutes left, because, we want to at least be relatively honored to time. Maybe we can go ahead and open some questions. If anyone has things they want to add or say, I know Despina is saying some good things here too. I think that, I think mental health is going to get a boom because of a lot of people with issues with anxiety and fear. And I think she's actually really right about that. I think that there's going to be a lot of recovery that needs to happen on the other side. And probably even, I would even say, some PTSD that people are having from.
Sure. It's a trauma. Yeah.
This. So my name is Christian Gonzalez. I am a marriage and family therapist. You can contact me at cgonzalez@goarch.org. And I will talk to you very soothingly over the internet like this. Tell me more about your feelings, because I care.
Yeah.
Is that good? Is that a good therapist voice?
That was a very good therapist voice.
Good.
That was a very good therapist voice.
So any questions? Any things from anyone? I need more of a Fraser Crane, says Father Andrew.
Just something really toothy and very confident. Tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Quite stylish. Monica said, what's the next topic? Yeah, what are we doing next week so people can do their homework before we come together again?
I'm going to give a hint, and we'll see if anyone can figure it out. Bwom, bwom,
Strong bad.
bwom. Isn't that what it sounds like? Am I remembering correctly? I haven't
No,
seen
it does.
in a
It
long
does
time.
actually.
Anyone got it? Anyone?
Didgeridoo? Yes,
Yes, it's the didgeridoo. Yes, we are doing the didgeridoo. Christian is breaking. Yes, it's true. I'm going crazy.
No, this is a good clue. It's actually a good clue.
I
Any
think
other
so
guesses?
Too.
Sort of very drawn out, deep, rumbling soundtrack.
Yes, Steven! Inception. That's correct. Yes, we are. We're going to do Inception. That was great. Well done. Steven?
That's my cousin.
Your cousin?
Yeah.
You have a cousin?
I have multiple cousins, actually. Yeah.
I've got a cousin.
What a small world it is.
We are the same.
Ain't that the darndest thing?
Yeah, you're the same height as me. That is neat.
Your birthday is on April 20th. My birthday is on April 1st. What are the odds? Oh, man, my cousin is going to keep me honest.
There you go. Thank you. We appreciate it, cousin.
We're doing 2 family dinners a week just to hang out, and I appreciate that. Confession, I think I did text when we met together yesterday. My bad. And I took screenshots of my cousin and turned him into my Zoom sort of virtual background, which was also kind of fun. But anyway, yeah, next week, Inception. Take a look at Inception. Tiger King. Christian and I are talking about Tiger King. I've seen the first 3 episodes. Tiger King is a circus. Tiger King is intense and a lot. If you think Billy on the Street is scandalous, Tiger King is
Billy
scandalous.
On the Street.
So we'll talk about that. I very much like Westworld. I don't think Christian has watched Westworld. I very much enjoy Westworld. But anyway, next week for now, shoot us an email if you have any other suggestions for the weeks ahead. Inception is next week. We will be back here live at 12:30 Eastern time. The show we did last week is now up in the podcast feed. This with video will come up in the YouTube feed, youtube.com/Y2AM, probably by tomorrow. And that's it in the meantime.
Raphael,
one more
has
comment
something
from
nice here to say. Just want to say I've
Raphael.
been listening to Pop Culture Coffee Hour religiously since you guys started. And though I'm a Catholic, I really, truly appreciate the insights you guys have. And they've helped me a lot in thinking about the world, praying for you both. Raphael, that is very kind. Thank God. Thanks for
God bless you,
tuning
Raphael.
in, crossing that ecumenical divide. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
And thank you for your prayers. We definitely need them.
Yeah. Despina again voting for Westworld. I'm down for that.
I'm an Eastern Christian.
Eastworld.
Eastworld.
Yeah.
Thank you all for tuning in. Again, sorry for the difficulty we had at the beginning with some of the trolling and all of that kind of stuff. That was difficult. So thank you all
That's on me.
for
Sorry about
sticking
that.
with us and being forgiving and kind enough to bear with us through all of that. So appreciate you.
God bless you guys. We'll see you all next week. And no, I hope this does not delay Mandalorian season 2. At least we hope.
Well, fortunately for Mando, he's got a mask on, so he's pretty much COVID proof, And I don't know if oh my gosh, why am I forgetting what his armor's made out of?
Beskar.
I was like, where? I don't even know where my head was, but I think Beskar definitely has got to be like COVID proof as well. It's just got to be.
For is he Corvid proof? They might poop on his Beskar armor, the Corvids. For those who want more Star Wars, by the way, Christian and I are thinking about doing Clone Wars and Rebels in the weeks ahead too. So stay tuned for that. But next week, Inception. Do your homework, everybody. We'll see you live at 12:30 Eastern again. God bless. Christian, always fun. Blah.